Assassination that shook international confidence in Libya's rebels. At the height of the campaign against Colonel Gaddafi in late July, their commander-in-chief, General Younis, was murdered and mutilated, apparently by men on his own side, after being arrested on the orders of the rebel leadership. Well, now, with the murder still unsolved, there's mounting anger among members of Younis' large and powerful tribe. They say senior officials of the National Transitional Council, that now runs the country, conspired with Islamic extremists to kill the general, a claim the council strongly denies. Tim Hewell on a case that's threatening to destabilise the beginnings of new Libya.
They helped overthrow Gaddafi's regime, but now elders of one of Libya's most powerful tribes are threatening vengeance against his successors. The extraordinary, inexplicable death of their most prominent member, the commander of the rebel army, has shaken their confidence in the country's new leadership. General Fatah Younis was the biggest defector from Gaddafi's regime, NATO's main contact in Libya. But on the eve of a major offensive in July, he was arrested by his own side and later brutally murdered. Leaked documents seen by Newsnight reveal that a day earlier, officials of the rebels' Transitional Council had arrested General Younis without proper authority. The council denies involvement in his murder, but Younis' tribe doesn't believe that.
The conspiracy was concocted at the Executive Council, and they know who is behind it. They issued a summons to General Younis, they lured him, lay in wait for him, and they did what they did to him.
There's no proof of that, and the council denies it. But there is a mysterious chain of events revealing deep divisions within a revolution that so many died for, and that outside powers, including Britain, supported. The murder of General Younis dumbfounded the rebels' international backers, raising questions they'd tried to avoid about the nature of Libya's opposition and its potential ability to run the country. Even today, those questions haven't been completely laid to rest. The killing of the commander casts a long shadow over Libya's future. Abdul Fatah Younis was a controversial man. For 40 years, a key aide of Colonel Gaddafi's, latterly his interior minister, he changed sides during eastern Libya's February revolution. Though street talk in Benghazi claimed that his loyalties were still divided. In July, 5 months into the war, he was planning an attack on Gaddafi's lines at Brega, west of Benghazi, when rebel militiamen arrived with this warrant. Signed by a senior judicial officer of the Transitional Council, it ordered the Chief of Staff to be taken into custody and imprisoned, pending further investigation. In the middle of the night, he was escorted back to Benghazi. A council source says that he and his aides left calmly in just 2 cars. Family members who were present remember it differently.
We went with a reinforced guard, 2 or 3 brigades. They were in front of us, behind us, and on both sides. This type of security was very tough and very suspicious.
Eyewitnesses say they were arrested and escorted not by regular council forces, but by independent militiamen of unusually religious appearance.
The number of cars was 80 or 90, but it increased at every checkpoint. Every car was full of civilian rebels, fully armed. They were chanting, Allahu Akbar and Gaddafi and traitor. There was no one from the council to receive us, no one from the police, only civilians shouting in a very chaotic manner.
Just before dawn, Younis' attempts to find out what was going on yielded a result. The Defence Minister, General Dreli, scribbled this extraordinary note at 4:30 in the morning, countermanding the arrest warrant. He said it had been issued by a non-competent authority and might damage morale at the front. Soon after sending the note, according to the Council, the Defence Minister left for Egypt on urgent business. His order had no effect. The general was brought to this military camp. His son and the son of his aide, Colonel Hamis, were allowed to leave. They never saw their fathers alive again. It's still a mystery what happened to General Younis after he was taken behind these gates. The family came the following day to try to find out what had happened, but the place was already deserted, as it still is today. The following morning, thousands attended the funeral of Younis and his two aides in Benghazi's Liberation Square. All three had been found, burnt and mutilated in a valley outside the city, at the end of a day when the family says it had been assured by council officers that the general was safe, even about to appear at a press conference. The council says 2 men killed them, of whom one's already been arrested, part of a wider group of 16 suspects linked to the case. It's released few other details from the ongoing inquiry. But members of the Abeidat tribe say they've seen testimony that Islamic extremists, including at least one Egyptian, were involved.
They were an Islamic radical group who committed this execution, and according to the eyewitnesses who have been with him, his guards, so that people looked in a strange shape, with a long beard, with their vocalization, the way that they spoke, were obviously looks like people from an extreme background.
The council has said the killers were members of one fundamentalist brigade, Ubaydah ibn Jarrah, named after a companion of the Prophet Muhammad, which has now been disbanded. But the council chairman, Libya's new leader, insists that the murderers weren't following any political or religious agenda.
The nature of the killing suggests it was an act of personal revenge. It relates to something that happened more than 10 years ago in eastern Libya, something General Younis was involved in as the commander of special forces.
He's talking about an operation centred in this town, Derna, in the late 90s, when Gaddafi's regime tried to flush out suspected Islamist fighters. But Younis's family, local people and former Islamists say the general wasn't involved. Younis could have been killed because of suspicions that he was double-dealing, although there's no evidence, or, as the family believes, because he planned to disband Islamist-led militias.
Younis was their most dangerous enemy because he was a tough old soldier with charisma. He wanted to disarm these people and force them back to civilian life.
He believes the circumstances of the general's arrest show that those militias have supporters on the council.
Why was this task assigned to army militias? It can only be because there's a relationship between members of the executive board, perhaps the council itself, and these militias.
This is the council's unpublished internal report into events leading up to the general's arrest. It questions the legitimacy and independence of the Special Judicial Committee which issued the warrant, saying that the decision to appoint it was tarnished by shortcomings. One of those behind the decision was Religious Affairs Minister Salam al-Sheikhi, till recently Imam of a Manchester mosque. But he can't tell me anything about the case.
Anything related to the martyrdom of Abdul Fatah Younis, may Allah bless his soul, must be left to an official statement from the head of the council, and there I'll stop.
To Younis's supporters, the irregular process that led to his arrest looks highly suspicious. But it could just show incompetence. So was it a conspiracy that killed him? Or simply a series of unfortunate managerial mistakes that unintentionally delivered him into the wrong hands? In other words, a case of maladministration. That's certainly the version of events that the Transitional Council prefers.
There were some administrative mistakes by the Executive Cabinet. They have been investigated, and in the light of this, we've decided to reshuffle the Cabinet. These mistakes had nothing to do with the subsequent event.
But whatever's finally revealed, Younis's death certainly raised questions about Libya's independent military brigades. Enthusiastic volunteers of all kinds joined them when the revolution began, but most are now returning to civilian life. leaving a committed core that includes many from Islamist backgrounds.
These militias are outside the law. Their basic aim is to control the government of Libya, but the council's been weak in taking action against them.
The international faith placed in Libya's largely unknown and untested rebels as they began their fight against Colonel Gaddafi was an audacious leap in the dark. In many ways, as Britain, France and others now argue, it's been triumphantly vindicated. And yet, even now, we know surprisingly little about the exact political complexion of Libya's new leadership. In particular, we can't yet accurately gauge the strength of an Islamist element that is certainly becoming more evident and, some argue, more prominent. Before taking their leave of Younis's family, the visiting elders of his tribe, the Abaydat, are entertained with some extempore verse. It's a political rant, warning against division. But they all know, since the general's murder, that unity in post-revolutionary Libya will be much harder to achieve than they once hoped.
Tim Huell.